Get my 6. Sasquatch, potentially. Guys and girls, let me tell you, I'm cream crackered right now, as our friends in England would say. For those of you who are not from England, that means I'm tired, I'm worn out. My beautiful bride, Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, and myself and our son, Daniel, have been home less than an hour. We just got home from Williamsburg, Virginia. We went down and stayed one night, a couple days, and last night we finally made it to Busch Gardens Hallow Scream, their big, Halloween event. It's the second most visited Halloween event in the United States. I think Disneyland has something they do that's number one. And then today, we were out at Busch Gardens until, they closed at 10. We're there till 10. Came back to the room, and I uploaded a video of our experience here on this channel. So if you missed it, go watch it. It's great. We had a great time. Take you through an entire haunted house down there and see this festive show they put on at the end with dancing and music. And my beautiful bride, Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, jumped in there and stole the show at the end. It was just wonderful. So we're up till midnight putting that video on so you guys could share that experience. But then today was a long day. Got up, crack of dawn, put in my miles, ran for 30 minutes, did my workout. We went to Yorktown, because it's down there. That's a historic triangle. You got Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, all three right there together. We'd been to Williamsburg and Jamestown, not Yorktown, so we went there, spent much of the day at Yorktown, and then drove home almost 3 hours. Well, it's a 2-hour drive, but we break it up. We stop and eat, and we'll go to the rest stops and whatever. But it's about a 3-hour drive for us. But I'm tired, and so, but I'm not going to shortchange you. I have a very creepy story. It's not my story, but it's creepy nonetheless. I'm going to share it with you here, and I'm going to go down there, and it's a bit chilly here. I'm going to build a fire, and I'm going to be going to bed not too long after dark. Still felt like summer down in Williamsburg. They're much farther south. Well, I don't know if they're a whole lot farther south. It's elevation. It's an elevation thing. They're at sea level. So it was felt like summer down there today, even though it was October. Then we came back to, Albemarle County, just outside of Charlottesville. We're in the Blue Ridge Mountains here, so we're maybe 1,500 feet higher. It's chilly. So I got to go make a fire. But I'm not going to rush this. I'm going to tell it the right way. So we were at Busch Gardens last night doing the Hollow Screen thing, did the haunted houses, rode a really cool roller coaster. I don't know what the name of it was, but it was Dearly and Daniel's first roller coaster ever. And they were so excited until they rode it. And then they said they're never going to ride another roller coaster ever. You know how that goes. It was a blast. Did the haunted houses, caught the show. But just before the show started, we walked into this, I think it was called Killarney Pub, to get a couple of waters and Daniel's Powerade or Gatorade. He always has to drink those instead of water. I get it. He's 10. They have flavor. Hold on. Excuse me there. Somebody was calling me. I didn't turn on my do not disturb this time. Sorry about that. I walked in and I saw an older man in his mid to late 70s. He was in a wheelchair. He was wearing a hat that said 101st Airborne, Vietnam veteran, and he had his rank pinned in the middle. And by the way, Thaddeus Howard, thanks for the hat. Look at that Bigfoot Sasquatch by the light of the full moon. And so I gave him one of these. And he gave me one of these, Airborne. So if you served in the military and you were one of us who were dumb enough to jump out of a perfectly good airplane at least 5 times to get your wings, you know exactly what that means. If you're not in that group, well, you now know exactly what that means. Kind of like how, you know, certain secret societies have certain handshakes, or maybe fraternities have certain similar, you know, handshakes, or one of those crazy things we do at airborne school. That's ours. Okay? So we go out later just before the show starts, and it turns out this gentleman and his wife are right beside us. We watched the show together, and you've got to go watch that video. It's the one right on here before this one. You know, here's the title, I think. It's called Join Us for Busch Gardens Hallow Scream 2021 or whatever. You got to watch it. So we watched the show together. It's about a, 10-minute show. Very entertaining. Seemed a lot longer than that because it was full. It was very hearty. So we're small talking for just a little bit after the show. You know, we had that whole Army vet thing going for us. And by the way, and I want to point this out quickly, if you're a veteran, you didn't know this. When we went to Yorktown today, they let us in for free because hey, you got a veteran discount? Showed them the VA ID. This year is the first year ever that they're allowing veterans and their families into every national park in America for free. They gave me a card with a 1-year pass, and they said, hey, if we do this again next year, just renew it. And they were hoping to be able to do it again next year. This is wonderful because we have this here. We're in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and there's this thing called the Skyline Drive that goes through the Shenandoah National Forest. Runs along, like, parallel to the Appalachian Trail. And there's one point right up on it above us here where we can almost see our house. Yeah, it's really neat. And we go up there every spring when everything's in bloom. We go up there every fall when the leaves are different colors. And we can do that for free now. It used to cost us $35. So if you're a veteran and you're anywhere close to any national park, go to it, especially if you've never been to it before. You don't even have to pay now. It's awesome. All right, so anyway, that's what I learned at Yorktown today. But last night, after the show's over, we just start talking to this couple. And we're talking about how, you know, obviously we love Halloween. And all things creepy. And so the question came up, why is it that those of us who love all things, you know, potentially Bigfoot, Sasquatch, paranormal, supernatural, horror, thriller, all these things, it kind of, a lot of people think you've got to be a little bit twisted in the head to get excited about things that scare you, you know? But obviously there are a lot of us who are twisted in the head because a lot of us really enjoy October and those brisk October nights. So anyway, I just, you know, shared some of, you know, I didn't tell them who I was, what I did. They have no idea to this day about that, but talked about, you know, why I kind of like, you know, creepy stuff. And the old woman, not the veteran, but the older woman, she was probably mid to late 70s, shared a story with us that made my spine tingle, that I believe was worthy telling you here today, and so I'm going to at this point. They, just a month ago, moved down here to Virginia from Massachusetts. Massachusetts. And I said to them, wow, just in time before another brutal, you know, New England winter set in. They're like, yeah. They came down here for the weather, and of course, you know, the gentleman, he's got some health issues, and warmer weather is more tolerable for him than cold weather, okay? So the woman, his wife, is telling us about something that happened, not to her so much as it was to her cousin, who was more like a sister and a best friend, but who's been dead for half a century, 50 years. And she said There is no way between heaven and earth to explain the events that took place with her cousin, but she witnessed them and she knows them to be true. And ever since then, she was a believer. And I said, well, you can't just say that and not tell us what happened. And so she did. And she talked about how when they were little girls, they were always so close. Their families lived close by each other. I think their mothers were sisters, something like that. And they would have sleepovers. They'd spend the night together. And when they were about 12 or 13 years old, her cousin started having these terrible nightmares. And her cousin described the nightmares to her, and they basically went like this. They lived somewhere along the coast up in Massachusetts. And in the dream, her cousin would see herself walking through an empty field. She would enter a forest on a trail, and she would come out on a cliff. And on this cliff, it was about 40 yards to a sheer drop-off, which went down to the coast where the waves would crash. But about 40 yards back from this drop-off, there was a church. And there was a graveyard. And in her dream, she was always drawn to the graveyard. She could hear the waves crashing. She could smell the salt in the air. She could feel the stickiness of the salty air, which we felt down in Yorktown today, and it was great. Dearly is making a video of that experience and publishing it to her channel, Life with Dearly. You got to watch it. We ate lunch today there. Actually, we were ready to leave, but then we said, no, let's have lunch here to save us a stop on the way home. So we got home a little bit quicker than 3 hours, I guess 2.5, because we did stop at the rest areas. But we ate fresh seafood right there by the water, the Chesapeake Bay. Oh my gosh, it was delicious. My mouth's watering. So it was a similar climate. It was a little colder, of course, in Massachusetts, but she was always drawn to this graveyard. And there was one grave in particular she was drawn to, and she would go there. And when she would go there in her dream as a 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old girl, this face would just come up out of the soil. And half of it was handsome as the Dickens, and the other half was, you could tell it, she said it was, you could tell it was the same man. It was a man's face. But the other half was aged, and the mouth was drooping. And he would always say, in time, I will come for you. And then she'd wake up. She'd wake up in terror. She'd be sweating, screaming sometimes. Her cousin would go to her, the woman I talked to last night. What is it? What is it? And it was always the same dream. And she had this dream commonly through puberty, as she went through puberty. And the face always said, in time I will come for you. So they went to Temple University, which I guess is in Massachusetts. Are they the turtles, the terrapin, the Temple terrapin? I don't know. She ended up meeting a guy at college who, came from a good family, solid background. They fell in love. They got married. By the time she was 30, they'd had a couple kids. She didn't work, the cousin. She never worked outside of the house. She stayed home. She took care of the kids. She made sure that her husband's, he never had to worry about, chores and duties and all that stuff at home. He was very successful, made a lot of money. This would have been like 50 years ago. What was that? 1970s, early 70s? I don't know. Her cousin was blessed, and she said her cousin went on and on all the time about how blessed she was. She had a great husband who loved her. She loved him. They had 2 healthy kids. Their needs were met, and they had money left over after paying the bills. They were well on their way to building, they were on pace to become affluent. They were just, everything was going right in their lives. and she was grateful for all of it. But when she got into her early 30s, she began suffering from depression. And again, I was going to point out here, listen, if you have a toothache, where do you go? The dentist, right? If you get hurt, you're out here sawing down trees or whatever, cutting and splitting firewood, and you hit your foot with the axe, where do you go? Well, you go to the ER or to the doctor. You eventually see the doctor. For the life of me, I'll never understand why so many people who, when they suffer from depression or any sort of, psychological issues, go to a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I think 100 years from now, people are going to look back on us and laugh. Or not laugh, but they're going to be like, wow. It's so amazing how they viewed mental illness as a sign of weakness, or especially with men, it's even worse. But I'm getting off on the wrong trail here. Let me just stick with the story. The woman I spoke to last night, her cousin, who was like a sister and a best friend, finally convinced her, hey, go talk to a counselor. This might be biological. It's something maybe because of your body's chemistry. Because her cousin would go on, why am I sad? Why am I always depressed? Why do I feel so bad? I've got a good husband, 2 good kids, we got money. I'm grateful for it. Hey, sometimes you just get depressed, and sometimes when that happens, going and talking to somebody about it is a big help, So she went and met with a counselor, and the counselor said, you know what you need? This is just a recommendation, okay? And this is the 1970s. They had moved beyond lobotomies and electric shock therapy, but they hadn't quite gotten to the, where we are now. He told her, you're tired, you need a break. He said, go somewhere alone for like a week. Go to the, what are your interests? And she said she always loved the ocean and all these things. He said, well, listen. He said, I'm an avid fly fisherman, and you recommended she go to a place in Maine, which is ironic because I've fly fished in Maine on the Penobscot River. Beautiful place. He told her, go to Maine. He says, it's beautiful up there. There's this place you can go get a cabin. It's out in the middle of nowhere, but yet you'll be safe, because there's somebody that runs the resort there or whatever. Take a week to yourself. Don't go up there and don't do any sort of excruciating exercises. Don't take any work up with you that you can do while you're in your cabin. Go up there and just sit in the woods and stare at the Atlantic, from the beach. Just take a break. You're being super mom, you're being super wife, you're stressed. That was the recommendation. So upon the urging of her cousin, the woman I spoke with last night, she decided, okay, maybe it's a good idea. And her husband was so supportive. He said, yeah, honey, go. I'll keep the kids, for a week, whatever, by myself. I'll take time off from work to be able to stay here with them. You just go up there and you take this break you need, and hopefully it helps. If it doesn't, we'll come up with something else. So she goes up there, and she was supposed to stay for 5 days. It wasn't quite a week. It was 5 days. And on the 5th day, a massive storm blew in from the Atlantic, and she didn't come home. And I thought, well, maybe she just couldn't travel because of the storm. Well, on the 6th day, she wasn't back home either, and she did have phone service at where she was. They didn't have cell phones at the time, of course, but she had not called in 2 days. So the lady I spoke to last night, who was this woman's cousin, and the woman's husband got in the car in Massachusetts and drove up to Maine to go to the place where she was staying. Now, the kids stayed with somebody else. The kids didn't go. So they got up there in Maine, and they realized that this storm had come in and it had wreaked havoc on this little place. It's not like it was a big, massive resort. It had 5 or 6 different cottages that were spread out by half a mile so everybody could have their seclusion and their privacy. And they went to the keeper of the resort, and they're like, hey, where's so-and-so? She was supposed to come home 2 days ago. And they were like, oh, my God, you haven't heard? And they were like, no, we haven't heard. What is it that we haven't heard? And they were like, we can't find her. And they said, well, what do you mean you can't find her? And they said, well, a couple of their employees, a couple of groundskeepers said that the night of the storm, they saw her walking arm in arm. Guys, I'm getting goosebumps. They saw her walking arm in arm with a man they'd never seen before towards the cliffs that overhang the beach, and this is where the storm hit. 2 different people saw her with this man. They went out to where the storm was, where it hit the beach, and at this point, you could tell where the ocean, where the waves had, over the years, eroded the beach, eroded it, back and back and back and back and back, until finally it reached a very small church that sat on top of that cliff, and it had torn the church apart. And not just that, but it had started taking some of the graves and pulling them out to sea. The woman who ran the resort said that her employees said they followed the foot trails to the graveyard and they just ended there. And their fear was that this woman and whoever this man was she was with had been pulled out to sea during the storm. So they go looking for her. They find the graveyard. They find the footprints that lead up to it. And they find a tombstone, a gravestone, at the top of a grave that had been torn apart by this storm. The casket and the remains that were in it, obviously taken out to sea. The tombstone remained, and the last name on the tombstone was McGregor. See you for more next time.